Oh, that. I'm looking for a sign. Oh, there it is. The loner. Contrary to popular opinion, Lovecraft was not an ever-frowning, eccentric, grumpy loner. He considered himself to be a person who appreciated humor. Moreover, he would often meet with friends in his apartment or at various cafes in Brooklyn and Manhattan, and sometimes his social life was so intensive, his work would suffer for months. There was a point when he finally decided he needed to put an end to daily meetings and lording in New York cafeterias, and resorted to hiding at home and reading with the main room light turned off, pretending he wasn't there whenever a friend knocked on his door. He also had another method of deterring his guests, which involved greeting them in a bathrobe, with an unmade bed visible in the background and piles of paper scattered across the floor. I think that's just called depression.
I have said that the unbroken monotony of the rolling plain was a source of vague horror to me.
Sorry, I'm drinking orange juice.
But I think my horror was greater when I gained the summit of the mound and looked down the other side into an immeasurable pit or canyon.
Well, it's not unfathomable this time, it's immeasurable.
Whose black recesses the moon had not yet soared high enough to illumine. I felt myself on the edge of the world, peering over the rim into a fathomless chaos of eternal night. Through my terror ran curious reminiscences of Paradise Lost, and of Satan's hideous climb through the unfashioned realms of darkness. As the moon climbed higher in the sky, I began to see that the slopes of the valley were not quite so perpendicular as I had imagined.
I'm looking for a sign. A sign. There's no
Ledges
sign.
and outcroppings of rock afforded fairly easy footholds for a descent, whilst after a drop of only a few hundred feet, the declivity became very gradual.
So it goes down. No sign.
Urged on by an impulse which I cannot definitely analyze,
That's
I scrambled
man-made.
with difficulty down the rocks and stood on the gentler slope beneath, gazing into the Stygian deeps where no light had yet penetrated. All at once, my attention was captured by a vast and singular object on the opposite slope, which rose steeply about 100 yards ahead of me.
Well, I say man-made, but it's not. What I mean is doesn't form naturally. That's what I meant.
An object that gleamed whitely in the newly bestowed rays of the ascending moon.
Pretty. Yeah, that would be that. Any place around me that has an elder sign? Elder sign? How about the moon? No. Alright, I guess we just go. Squish, squish, squish.
That it was merely a gigantic piece of stone, I soon assured myself.
Not with right angles, it isn't.
But I was conscious of a distinct impression that its contour and position were not altogether the work of nature.
Well, I just said...
A closer scrutiny filled me with sensations I cannot express.
Oh, he wants me to look at that. Okay, let's look for the elder sign real quick. Just in case. No, I'm not seeing any. Alright, let's keep going.
For despite its enormous magnitude, and its position in an abyss which had yawned at the bottom of the sea since the world was young, I perceived beyond a doubt that the strange object was a well-shaped monolith, whose massive bulk had known the workmanship and perhaps the worship of living and thinking creatures.
Yeah, it's not naturally formed.
Dazed and frightened, yet not without a certain thrill of the scientist's or archaeologist's delight, I examined my surroundings more closely.
There's dirt. There's moon. There's a rock. Elder sign? No, no elder sign. I don't see any anyway. Let's keep going. Squish, squish, squish.
The moon, now near the zenith, shone weirdly and vividly above the towering steeps that hemmed in the chasm, and revealed the fact that a far-flung body of water flowed at the bottom, winding out of sight in both directions and almost lapping my feet as I stood on the slope. Across the chasm, the wavelets washed the base of the Cyclopean monolith, on whose surface I could now trace both inscriptions and crude sculptures.
We're vaguely humanoid in appearance. Nope, still no elder sign. Okay.
The writing was in a system of hieroglyphics unknown to me and unlike anything I'd ever seen in books.
There's a Cthulhu in the middle.
Consisting for the most part of conventionalized aquatic symbols such as fishes, eels, octopi, crustaceans, mollusks, whales, and the like. Several characters obviously represented marine things which are unknown to the modern world.
Like Dagon and whatever those things are.
But whose decomposing forms I had observed on the ocean-risen plain.
You mean squid and nautilus?
It was the pictorial carving, however, that did most to hold me spellbound.
Storytelling methods. Dagon contains many themes and storytelling methods that Lovecraft developed in his later works, such as telling the story through the carvings at the Mountains of Madness and Nameless City, journals and characters' notes, the Shadow of Time, the Hunter of the Dark, islands emerging from the ocean, the Call of Cthulhu, with fictional beings and deities based on real events and mythologies, Migo in the Whisperer in Darkness. It's also considered the origin of the popular Cthulhu mythos. Some of Lovecraft's other stories also include a manner similar to Dagon, but let's skip the details in order not to spoil the ending.
Plainly visible across the intervening water, on account of their enormous size, were an array of bas-reliefs whose subjects would have excited the envy of a doré. I think that these things were supposed to depict men, at least a certain sort of men, though the creatures were shown disporting like fishes in the waters of some marine grotto.
Oh, mermaids.
Or paying homage at some monolithic shrine, which appeared to be under the waves as well. Of their faces and forms I dare not speak in detail,
Fishies.
for the mere remembrance makes me grow faint.
Oh yes, very scary.
Grotesque beyond the imagination of a Poe or a Bulwer.
Oh, I see. These are their faces. Okay.
They were damnably human in general outline, despite webbed hands and feet, shockingly wide and flabby lips, glassy, bulging eyes, and other features less pleasant to recall.
Give them a nice pat on the head.
Curiously enough, they seem to have been chiseled badly out of proportion with their scenic background. For one of the creatures was shown in the act of killing a whale, represented as but little larger than himself.
Ooh.
I remarked, as I say, their grotesqueness and strange size, but in a moment decided that they were merely the imaginary gods of some primitive fishing or seafaring tribe. Some tribe whose last descendant had perished eras before the first ancestor of the Piltdown or Neanderthal man was born.
Whoa. The Piltdown Man. Lovecraft would often use the latest scientific discoveries as inspiration for his works. He would even update his stories at least the last moment in order to make sure they reflected the latest breakthroughs. Unfortunately, this method was not without its flaws. After Lovecraft's death, the Piltdown Man discovery mentioned in Dagon turned out to be a paleoanthropological fraud. And Charles Dawson, an amateur archaeologist, announced that he had discovered the missing link between ape and man, the fossilized remains of previously unknown early human. Years later, they turned out to be a forgery, but by that point, the fraud had already meant to negatively affect early research on human evolution. In the year when the discovery took place, the majority of the scientific community believed Dawson indeed found the missing link. In 1953, the Time magazine published evidence proving that Dawson was a con man. It turned out the fossils of the previously unknown early human consist of a human skull, the jaw of an orangutan, and chimpanzee teeth. Lovely.
Awestruck at this unexpected glimpse into a past beyond the conception of the most daring anthropologist, I stood musing whilst the moon cast queer reflections on the silent channel before me.
Yes, look at those reflections. They're very queer.
Then, suddenly, I saw it.
Oh. Oh!
With only a slight churning to mark its rise to the surface, the thing slid into view above the dark waters. Vast, Polyphemus-like and loathsome, it darted like a stupendous monster of nightmares to the monolith, about which it flung its gigantic scaly arms, the while it bowed its hideous head and gave vent to certain measured sounds.
Is it like praying or... Oh no, we're blacking out.
I
Lovely.
think I went mad then.
Sure.
Of my frantic ascent of the slope and cliff, and of my delirious journey back to the stranded boat, I remember little.
Elder sign? The elder sign. I have time to look for the elder sign. Don't worry about it. It's cool. Oh.
I believe I sang a great deal, and laughed oddly when I was unable to sing.
Oh, you sang. You're singing. Okay. And you're laughing. That makes no sense. Yeah. There's that whale we saw on the way here.
I have indistinct recollections of a great storm sometime after I reached the boat. At any rate, I know that I heard pearls of thunder and other tones which nature utters only in her wildest moods.
Sounds like fun. I don't see all the tentacles moving and writhing.
When I came out of the shadows, I was in a San Francisco hospital,
Okay.
brought thither by the captain of the American ship which had picked up my boat in mid-ocean. In my delirium, I had said much, but found that my words had been given scant attention. Of any land upheaval in the Pacific, my rescuers knew nothing, nor did I deem it necessary to insist upon a thing which I knew they could not believe.
Journalist. Lovecraft was a prominent figure in the world of amateur journalism. In 1915, he started publishing his own journal called The Conservative, which included political and social commentary, poetry, short stories, and literary criticism written by him and other authors. Howard was a skilled wordsmith, but he also took criticisms to heart, which resulted in his decision to step away from writing poetry and concentrate on weird fiction again, for the first time since his teenage years. Dagon, published in 1919, is one of those short stories written during that period. In this example excerpt from The Conservative, the master of horror fiction explains his attitude towards warfare and the idea of world peace. While any sane human can believe in the possibility of universal peace is more than the conservative can fathom. Should the entire civilized world agree simultaneously to disarm, one or more nations would undoubtedly retain secret armaments and at the proper time take advantage of their more altruistic and less astute contemporaries. In a wild career of conquest against unarmed victims, no country is or can ever be above warfare until the basic impulses of the human animal have miraculously changed. Okay. So, basically, in defense of Dagon. In 1921, Lovecraft released a series of 3 essays. The defense reopens. The defense remains open, and final words. Later published as a collection titled In Defense of Dagon, in which he rebuked a series of criticism directed at his work. Some notable quotes. I paint what I dream and will let the public settle the rest amongst themselves. Mr. Monday asks the raison d'etre of Dagon. I will give it purely and simply to reproduce a mood. Its object is the simplest in all art, portrayal. The physical horrors of war, no matter how extreme and unprecedented, hardly have a bearing on the entirely different realm of the supernatural terror. Ghosts are still ghosts, and the mind can get more thrills from unrealities than realities. In the essays, Lovecraft touches upon the topics of atheism, materialism, and the quest for truth and the love of science. So that was 2 elder signs. 3 elder signs. The atheist. Lovecraft considered himself an atheist and absolute materialist, which he attributed partly to his early childhood interest in astronomy and science in general. In his own words, I am indeed an absolute materialist so far as actual belief goes, with not a shred of credence in any form of spiritualism, supernaturalism, religion or spiritualism, transcendentalism, metempsychosis, or immortality. All I say is that I think it is damned unlikely that anything like a central cosmic will, a spirit world, or an eternal survival of personality exist. They are the most preposterous and unjustified of all guesses which can be made about the universe. And I am not enough of a hair splitter to pretend that I don't regard them as errant and negligible moonshine. In theory, I'm an agnostic, but pending the appearance of radical evidence, I must be classed practically and provisionally as an atheist. Okay. So there was 3 elder signs in here. So anyway, most likely, our character here probably was just suffering from, like, heat stroke and was delusional for quite a while.
Once I sought out a celebrated ethnologist and amused him with peculiar questions regarding the ancient Philistine legend of Dagon, the fish god.
Oh. Dagon. Dagon was the main deity of the Philistines, worshipped throughout the Middle East as the ancient god of fertility and crops. In Hebrew, the word Dagon was a common noun for grain. The rulers of Akkad, Mesopotamia, chose him as the patron saint of their war conquests. He also appeared as the judge of the dead in the Assyrian poem and an underworld prison warder in one of the Babylonian texts. He is often mistakenly taken for a fish god due to the wrong interpretation of his name, as in Hebrew the word dag means fish. In H.P. Lovecraft's works, Dagon is an underwater deity ruling over the deep ones, a humanoid race with fish traits that resides in the oceans. He is worshipped by a secret cult called the Esoteric Order of Dagon. I didn't know that Dagon actually had a slightly real thing about him, actually. That was new. That's new info for me. Oh, that's what we're supposed to be looking at. Okay. Let me just look around and make sure there's nothing else. I don't think there is.
But soon perceiving that he was hopelessly conventional, I did not press my inquiries.
You're not gonna look at the Necronomicon? August Derleth and the Cthulhu Mythos. August Derleth was an American writer and anthologist. He also befriended Lovecraft and published many of his works through his company Arkham House. Oh, that's why Arkham keeps showing up in Lovecraft stuff. Okay. Although he greatly contributed his popularization of the author's works after his death, he is surrounded by numerous controversies. One of the most questionable decisions involved introducing the good versus evil doctrine. Derleth was a devout Catholic to the Cthulhu mythos, which contrasts with Lovecraft's view of the world and his approach to cosmic horror. As a result, the author's works are often misunderstood and misinterpreted in today's culture. It's also worth noting that Lovecraft was never really interested in creating a mythology, and the term Cthulhu mythos was coined by Derleth after the author left the mortal plane. Okay. The Marketer. Lovecraft's attempts to find a job in 1925 were influenced by advice he received from friends. Among others, he started freelancing for a marketing magazine where he would write announcements and commercials. Feel free to judge his copywriting skills for yourself. From an ad for Curtis Woodwork. Curtis Woodwork embraces both the usual structural units and the cleverest contrivances of built-in or permanent furniture such as bookcases, dressers, buffets, cupboards. Every model is conceived and created with the purest art, ripest scholarship, and mellowest craftsmanship, which energetic enterprise can command, and made to conform rigidly to the architecture of each particular type of home. The cost, considering the quality, is amazingly low, and a trademark on the individual pieces prevents any substitution by careless contractors. It's very, very wordy, and I don't think most people would be okay with all the big words. What do we have elsewhere? We had 2 elder signs, but... Oh, he wants us to look there. Whoa. That was weird. I don't see anything over there. Alright, I guess we go here. Oh. The scientist. These days the word scientist is a widely accepted term, but at the time Dagon was published, it was subject to a wide debate. After the author used it in his story, critics pointed out that man of science was a more appropriate term to employ. He admitted in defense of Dagon that if Dagon were to be reprinted, he would indeed use the phrase they suggested. Scientist was coined as an analog to artist, to be used when referring to those studying different branches of science. Yet, in the 19th and early 20th century, scientific researchers in Great Britain and the United States were of the opinion that man of science, resembling the term man of letters, was only proper choice. Among other things, it was gender-specific, indicating that science was an endeavor to be pursued by only one sex. The term scientist became more accepted only after World War II, and man of science started fading into obscurity as an old-fashioned synonym. Oh, interesting. Hi! What are you looking at? Let me look really closely at everything. Oh, it wants me to go over there next. That's... Okay, fine. I guess we're leaving.
It is at night, especially when the moon is gibbous and waning, that I see the thing. I tried morphine, but the drug has given only transient surcease, and has drawn me into its clutches as a hopeless slave. So now I am to end it all, having written a full account for the information or the contemptuous amusement of my fellow men.
What's this? Lovecraft on tobacco and alcohol. Lovecraft hated tobacco, even though he used to smoke when he was 12, in order to look and feel like an adult. In correspondence with his friend Reinhard Kleiner, he claims that he quit as soon as he started wearing long pants. He also had a very strong opinion about alcohol, as evidenced in his letter to that. As for the matter of drinking, I have never tasted intoxicating liquor, and I never intend to, having a strong aesthetic disgust at anything which burns or coarsens the delicate natural equipoise of the evolved human intellect and imagination. Drinking excited my personal repugnance, hence I don't drink. Let the herd do what they will. I am rather in favor of prohibition. The prohibition of any one antisocial force, as well as any other. Interesting. I can't really look at anything else, so I guess we do this.
Often, I ask myself if it could not all have been a pure phantasm.
I mean, it probably was just like sunstroke, random dreams.
A mere freak of fever, as I lay sun-stricken and raving in the open boat, after my escape from the German man-of-war. This I ask myself, but ever does there come before me a hideously vivid vision in reply. I cannot think of the deep sea without shuddering at the nameless things that may at this very moment be crawling and floundering on its slimy bed, worshipping their ancient stone idols and carving their own detestable likenesses on submarine obelisks of water-soaked granite. I dream of a day when they may rise above the billows to drag down into their reeking talons the remnants of puny, war-exhausted mankind. Of a day when the land shall sink and the dark ocean shall ascend amidst universal pandemonium.
Elder side? No.
The end is near.
What? Who's there? Ooh.
I hear a noise at the door, as of some immense slippery body lumbering against it.
Okay, before we look at that and get, like, whatever from it. Okay, so we just gave ourselves more morphine, which is why our vision is all swammy. Oh. Lovecraft's letters. As to letters, my case is peculiar. I write such things exactly as easily and as rapidly as I would utter the same topics in conversation. Indeed, epistolary expression is with me largely replacing conversation as my condition of nervous prostration becomes more and more acute. I cannot bear to talk much now, and I am becoming as silent as the spectator himself. My loquacity, I think, extends itself on paper. H.P. Lovecraft to Reinhard Kleiner. Throughout his life, Lovecraft penned around 100,000 letters to his friends and fans, out of which about 10% survive to this day, but his tendency to endlessly correspond was a relatively late growth. In youth, I scarcely did any letter writing. Thanking anybody for a present was so much of an ordeal that I would rather have written a 250-line pastoral or a 20-page treatise on the rings of Saturn. Lovecraft would often skip meals to afford postage. Collections of his correspondence have been published in various books, and selected letters can be found online. Some readers consider them his most important legacy. Okay, that was something I missed earlier that was over there, and I didn't click on because I didn't know how to. Anyway, let's go greet the sea creature.
It shall not find me.
No, come on, give it a big ol' hug.
God, that hand! The window! The window!
To the window! To the wall. Oh. Squish. Thank you for playing. Hope you enjoyed immersing yourself in our little pool of cosmic horror. We would appreciate if you took a moment to rate Dagon and other stuff. So there is a couple of DLCs. I don't know what they are. I thought one of them was like the music, maybe, and I don't know what the other one is. Maybe it's more story. I will look into it. This was fun. This was a very interesting way to talk about Lovecraft and Dagon and that sort of thing. Because a lot of his stories were short stories that were basically just this, like, a guy saw a thing and then when he went crazy. That's a lot of his stories, basically. And this was something like a little bit of a haunted house tour kind of thing. That's what it kind of felt like. Not that that's a bad thing. And I know I talked during most of this and I wasn't really scared. But that's fine. The atmosphere was actually pretty good. The set pieces that we saw were really nice. I liked them. Well designed. After hearing the words of unfathomable and things I care not to mention, they still managed to create something that was scary enough that you could, envision it. Anyway, I hope you enjoyed this, and I hope you join me on whatever it is the next play. Bye-bye.